Amazing. We are back, and it's time for us to now peruse through the newspapers. And we're going to be starting off with the Standard. And I see the top story here, quite interesting, saying Gachagua, is life better now that I'm impeached? Well, former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua yesterday wondered aloud why Kenyans are facing the same problems he was being blamed for, even as President William Ruto said he will ensure his broad-based government thrives. And Rigathi Gachagua here saying that if Gachagua was the problem and you hiked taxes, why don't you review it downwards now that he has left office? So still on that battle. Looks like Gachagua has not really let go, but he is really on their case, almost like taking the position of an opposition leader now that he has been impeached. But that is it, and you can look at that story on page 8. And still on the top page, I see another story here. Chronic wastage in schools as 200,000 dropouts. So while government insists that all KCPE candidates transition to secondary school, the number of students sitting for KCSE tells a different story, one of consistent decline. And this is a story covered on page 4. And I see here that data shows the past 3 cohorts of students have lost 568,000 learners. What is happening? And I see the 2024 KCSE cohort saw the sharpest decline, 213,691 dropping out. Still on the top page, lecturers in endless fight for better pay. So for decades, lecturers in public universities have contended with broken promises, meager pay, and delayed salaries, and there is no end in sight for the struggle. This is a story on page 6, and today on page 2, what is covered is unwelcome guest. Crows pose big threat to coast ecosystem. So the invasive birds have become almost a permanent fixture of the Kenyan coast, and I see they have caused a negative impact on agriculture, environment, tourism, and also the public health sector. And some of the things I see, it has been harassing residents, a public health risk, and a costly problem, aviation concerns. They're looking at the house crow as a threat. These birds pose a risk of in-air collisions for planes, says Harrison Machio. So the coastal community's desire to rid itself of house crows is clear, and in part 2 we explore their eradication strategies and their potential impact. So we'll continue to follow up on that same story. And page 3, Ole Pai Pai, a sanctuary of peace where home care feels like family, is on page 3. It is the first of its kind in a region where taking elderly parents to nursing homes is often viewed as a taboo. Facility features a memory room where residents socialize and work on cognitive recovery. This is very, very beautiful. Damaris Store, the director of Ole Pai Pai, is saying many parents in Kenya live lonely lives as their children move abroad for work or studies. I decided to bring this concept home. And I see here, according to TOR, Kenyans in the diaspora are increasingly viewing home care facilities as viable options for their parents, no longer associating them with abandonment, as is often the case in traditional Kenyan culture. This is a story covered on page 3, and I believe it's one beautiful move. And moving on, I see here that page 5, we have foreign policy review to capture global shifts. So Kenya's foreign policy is undergoing a transition in response to the emerging trends in international affairs. And more on the same, the final document will be presented to the president ahead of its expected launch in December. That's a story covered well on page 5. And moving on to the health and science pullout this morning, I see here that what is being covered is embracing snakes for a balanced ecosystem. Okay. Embracing the balance of nature, Benedetta Kiengo's farm fosters biodiversity and challenges fear of snakes, proving their essential role in healthy ecosystem while demonstrating how sustainable farming practices can support both wildlife and also agriculture. So still on the health and science today, stigma continues to be a major barrier in schizophrenia care. That's a story on page 17. And lastly, page 20 on the health and science pullout on the Standard, discovering how heavy periods trap young women in a cycle of suffering. That's a story on page 20. I believe women who maybe go through this will be a story of interest. Let's go to the sports page. Retegui, the striker Italian football longed for. So Matteo is the leading scorer in Serie A this season with 11 goals, and Atlanta manager Gian Piero Gasperini has helped Retegui flourish. Matteo Retegui here saying, I spoke with a lot with the manager. I spoke a lot with the manager and his staff. They also showed me videos of what they expect from me. It's an ideal situation for me. They want the best of me and they know how to get it. And I am really eager to learn. That's it on the sports. That is on the last page. And lastly, why Engin Firat was not the right man for Harambee Stars. Over 23 matches, Firat picked just 7 wins, 7 draws and 9 losses. The football coach has failed to guide the national team to 3 tournaments. And Engin Firat, Harambee Stars head coach here, saying we don't even have a proper training field in Kenya. There's a story on page 30 and also covered on page 31. And let us go now to the Daily Nation. And the Daily Nation this morning, the top story is 2027, Matiang'i taps Botswana polls experts. And former Interior Minister Fred Matiang'i has signed a contract with a firm led by ex-Israeli Mossad agent Ari Ben Menashe, who powered the surprise victory of Mr. Duma Boko in recent Botswana polls as he seeks to unseat President William Ruto in the 2027 elections. Interesting. And this is a story on page 4. And still on the top page, auctioneers go after senator over 1.25 million rent arrears. Can you imagine? A Nairobi court orders Runda police to assist fantasy auctioneers to access Karen Nyamo's home to seize household items for sale. This is 1.25 million of rent arrears. Oh, I mean, that's quite a lot. And still looking at the top page here, scramble for Uhuru as Mount Kenya political volcano erupts. So as 2027 general election formations start to take shape, key antagonists led by President William Ruto, his former deputy Rigathi Gachagua, and Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka are working to win retired President Uhuru Kenyatta's support. That's a story on page 7. And still on the top page here, I see a story, more Kenyans have sunk into poverty, report shows. And a new report has revealed how the high cost of living and unemployment sunk millions of Kenyans into poverty, leading 2 in 5 Kenyans poor in 2022. With 1 in 3 citizens unable to meet their minimum food requirements. The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, KNBS, poverty report shows that in 2022, some 20.16 million Kenyans lived in overall conditions of poverty. 16 million citizens could not afford basic food needs, and some 3.6 million people were in abject poverty. At least 1.1 million sank into poverty between 2021 and 2022. The study shows pages 2 and also 3. May we keep praying for this nation, because definitely these are worrying numbers. Let us go to page 2 today. And I see how high living costs and unemployment have pushed many Kenyans into poverty. That is the story that has been continued therein. And you can read on more of that on page 2 and also a bit of page 3 as well. And still on page 2 here, I see revealed why HIV/AIDS is killing more men than women in Kenya. That is a story covered also on page 2. Look at that story as well. And moving on, we are going to now have a look at the Junior Sport today. That is the pullout. And of course, we have some really beautiful story here. Modeling to inspire others. The Angel uses her platform to raise awareness on environmental conservation. This is a story on page 2. Beautiful, beautiful. This is, a pullout of the DN2 where we get to see our girls and our boys doing so well and actually pursuing their talent. So that's a story on page 2. That is the pullout today on the DN2. And I see here, check out these legendary stories from the halls of history. There is that on page 3, and that's on the classroom segment. And going to international news today, I see Russian missiles target Ukraine power facilities. So German chancellor's call to Vladimir Putin criticized by Ukrainian leader. That's a story on page 16, and I see explosions shake the city of Zaporizhzhia and the Black Sea port of Odessa. I am so sure I have not read that word correctly because it is quite difficult. Zapori and then ZH again, IA. You tell me how we read that. But that's a story on page 16, and you can look at it in more details. And going to the back page today, I see Fast Flight, Fast International Race. Miriam Jelagat's dream comes true. The 30-year-old mother of one hopes the race will open doors to a glittering career, and we wish her all the very best. And on page 31, all set for second edition of Law of the Rings on Saturday. So highlight of the event will be welterweight bout between Benjamin Jeru and also Shadrach Waweru. And page 30, Karanga seals 2025 Kenya Open berth. Kiambu-based player retains Kenya Amateur Golf Championships Series. That's a story on page 30. And concluding, we're going to be looking at the Business Daily and just what are the highlights. And the top story here, bank CEOs summoned over costly loans and cheap deposits. So CBK concerned banks are slow to lower lending rates. The average return on fixed deposit rate has fallen to 11.24%. And I see still on the top page, unclaimed cash, shares and dividends cross 75 billion shillings. So unclaimed cash, shares and dividends surrendered to a state agency have crossed the 75 billion shillings mark, reflecting the difficulty in reuniting the idle wealth as investors, including tycoons, show disinterest in reclaiming the assets. This is quite interesting, very, very interesting. We have money here that has not been claimed, and yet on the stories that we read, so many millions of Kenyans are still wallowing in poverty. So that is the irony of things here, and that is on page 2 of the Business Daily. And going to the back page, investors ignore the law of long-term averages, and investors are now anticipating tax cuts and further fiscal largesse from the next Trump administration. And that's a story on page 24. The last word today is from Anais Nin, a French-born American diarist. He is saying life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. That's the last word, and that's it for the newspaper review. I hope you are now informed, but most importantly, let us keep praying for our nation. I mean, I pray for a time when all these poverty levels are going to be alleviated and we are going to see a better nation that is actually earning enough even to put food on the table. I mean, those are very basic things that people shouldn't be lacking. But if we can help out, maybe in our neighborhoods or in the people that are connected to us, let us help them out. Let us not amass wealth while others are going through tough seasons. We can assist and we can be of great help to them. And that's it for the newspaper review segment. Let us now look at the video of the day.